Hello and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to go over some things to look for or consider if you're looking to buy a Honda Acty. Just for a little background, I do admit I'm not an expert or like a professional mechanic. Essentially, the way I came about my Acty was about 2 years ago. My brother was searching Craigslist. He saw this little van and he just had to have it. So he went and looked at it, bought it, and then the next day he had me come and look at it. I honestly had no idea what the heck I was looking at, but since then I helped him work on it. After about a year, he realized that he wanted to move on to a different project, but he still wanted to have the van around because he likes driving it. So I told him that I would gladly take it off his hands. So he actually gave me the van for free, which I'm super grateful for. And since then, I've turned this van into my daily driver and I've done a lot of basic maintenance. So I've gotten to know the platform. Quick side note, the Acty did come as a truck and or van. The body's different, but the underpinnings and all the mechanical stuff is the same. I just wanted to say that because I know some people may be confused, because when you look up Acty, most of the time you see the trucks. Now that we got that out of the way, the first thing I want to talk about is how do you plan on driving it? If you plan on daily driving your van or truck, I think something that's really important to know is just maintenance, because here in the States, I don't have the option to go down to AutoZone and buy a new alternator. You really have to plan out your maintenance and be just conscientious of that. Luckily, I'm in a position that if this thing breaks, I can go use my truck or MR2. Another important thing to note is that I only drive this in city, and that works perfectly fine for me because I literally live 5 minutes away from my work. So the fastest speed I see most days is like 35 miles per hour. This thing is not very fast, and I have taken it on the highway. That was actually terrifying for two reasons. So the first one is whenever someone would pass me, like a big vehicle, I would feel the wind and it would like shake the car or van actually. And the second thing is because it's not that fast and it doesn't have a lot of power, I got it up to about 60 miles per hour, but I was honestly pushing it. I know other people do daily drive their vans or trucks on the highway at about 65-70 miles per hour. They say they feel comfortable. Personally, I don't. So whenever I have to go on the highway or like long distances, I just take my truck. But for in-city driving, this thing's honestly really amazing because there's lots of room to put stuff in the back. In terms of gas mileage, it's not as good as one would think. I only average 25 to 30 miles per gallon. I have heard of people getting better. I've heard of people getting worse. My guess is it really comes down to how well the engine's running and also how do you drive it. Because if you're redlining it in every gear, your gas mileage is going to be worse. The second thing I want to touch on is actually price point. It's honestly really hard to tell you what you should pay. I mean, ultimately it's whatever you think it's worth. Now that I got that little disclaimer out of the way, I typically see Actys selling for anywhere from like $5,000 to $10,000. I actually have seen a few Actys sell for like low teens, so we're talking about like $11,000, $12,000, but those are the exception rather than the norm. There's a million ways they can be optioned. As I said, you can get a truck, van, you can get two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive. I've seen them modified a bunch of different ways. My biggest piece of advice is just really do your research. I know some of you may be curious as to what I paid for the van. As I mentioned, my brother gave this to me for absolutely free, which was amazing of him, and I'm super happy about that. He ended up paying $4,000 for this about 2 years ago. To be honest with you, I think he overpaid at the time. The van is actually in good mechanical shape for the most part. There are a few things I need to fix on it. The body is in super rough shape, and the crazy thing is the market as of like filming this video is absolutely nuts. So I did almost sell it because I wanted to buy a Corvette, and I had offers of $5,000 on the van, which is nuts to me, but I guess that just gives you a good visual of what $5,000, so the lower end of that market, can get. We're now going to go on to the actual inspection and like specific things you should look at when you're looking at a potential Acty that you want to buy. A couple things I want to note before that though. The first thing is when you go into it, just make sure that you're level-headed and be prepared to walk away. Don't go into it thinking this is the van, this is the truck for me, it's what I want, and let yourself get emotional. You really want to think logically about it, because something that seems really minor could end up being a huge pain in the butt down the road. The second thing I want to talk about is that you may not always be able to actually inspect your given vehicle that you're trying to buy, especially if you're importing. You're essentially doing sight unseen. If you're importing a vehicle, make sure you do research on what importer you're working with, because some of them are going to be a lot more truthful, forthcoming, and better than others. But even if you get a good importer, it's still a little bit of a gamble, unfortunately. And a good example of that is my brother's R33 Skyline that he got. Long story short, there's actually a bunch of issues with it that we weren't exactly aware of. This thing's actually in pieces right now because we're in the process of replacing the head gasket. The importer my brother worked with actually did a really good job in our opinion, but the reality is he was dealing with limited information as well, and that's just really the way things go sometimes. Definitely do your homework as much as possible, because the reality is there are going to be some people who just want to make a quick buck, which I honestly think that's what happened with my brother's car here. someone just wanted to sell it, so they swapped in an engine, patched it up, and then they sent it out the door. And then unfortunately, he's stuck holding a giant paperweight. Now I'm actually going to start pointing out some things you really want to look for when you're going to purchase one of these vehicles. First of all, any car from Japan is probably going to have rust, unfortunately. This van is no exception, and it actually has a really bad rust all over. There's holes because the rust is so bad, and in a lot of cases it may not actually look that bad. Some stuff you'll want to look for is stuff like this. So this may seem like it's just some minor bubbling, but underneath there's probably a good amount of rust. 9 times out of 10 that will be the case, that this little bubbling reveals a bigger problem. As I mentioned, the rust on this van is really bad, so this is the extreme side, but you really want to do your homework, because look at that, there's a literal rust hole. I could put several fingers through there. Considering this is my idea of a daily beater, so I can go haul stuff and I don't really have to care about keeping it nice, it's perfect for me. But if you're trying to find a nice clean example, definitely find something with minimal rust, because rust is very expensive to replace, especially if you're going to do it right. Also, you're going to want to look for mismatched panels. Luckily, this car doesn't really have that issue. I do think all the panels are original, but if there's been some type of like rust repair, the car's been in an accident or anything like that, it's super hard to match the paint the exact same, so there will be some slight differences. And I want to make sure to give you guys a really good example of that. So my MR2 here has been wrecked. You can clearly see the differences. Right here is the body of the MR2. This is all original, never been painted, but if you look over here, this coloring is actually slightly different. And if you want to see something even more extreme, here's the fender, which was not painted very well. There's a lot of orange peel, so this gives you an even better idea. And then when it comes to cars that have been in accidents, you'll see that the panel gaps are off. So look at this panel gap to this one. The Actys are economy vehicles, so the quality may not be the best from the factory, but if you see major differences in the panels gaps along with some paint discrepancies, that's a good sign something's up. After doing a quick once over of the exterior, you actually want to definitely get under the vehicle and check everything out. Getting under the vehicle is going to give you a good idea of things. So we are actually at the rear of the vehicle. So here I can see that the U-joints are actually messed up on the drive shaft, and that's a really big deal because they're supposed to be non-serviceable, but you can take them to a drive shaft shop. They'll be able to modify them and put new U-joints in, although that's going to cost you a little bit of money. And it's the little things like that that are going to quickly add up. $100 here, $100 there. Next thing you know, you spent $1,000. When you're looking underneath, like for the front end, you're going to want to look at the suspension, the steering components, making sure that everything's good. Pretty much when you're looking under there, it'd be like any other vehicle, just checking the basics. So in terms of like suspension components being worn and whatnot, that's not like an Acty thing. That's just an old vehicle thing, because at this point, if you're looking at a 90s Actys like this one is, I mean, it's 25, 30 years old. One thing you do really want to watch for is the passenger side engine mount. These things are known for failing prematurely. To give you guys a really good example of what I'm talking about, this is the old passenger side engine mount that was on my van. So this goes like this. The engine was actually sagging down. This is a really extreme example. You can see all the cracks and it's actually ripping. There's actually 3 mounts on here. So there's the one on the side that I showed you. There is one right there, and then there's also one on the driver's side. I do quickly want to note the fact that on the trucks, the battery is mounted externally on the side of the bed, and same thing with the coolant overflow tank. Those things are both known for being missing or just broken in general. I don't really have that issue on the van, but if you have a truck, expect the battery cover on the side to be missing and the coolant overflow tank to be cracked. Actually, in the van, if you come to the passenger side rear door and then pop this little thing off, you will find right here is the coolant overflow tank. You just undo this and then it comes on out. Right here is the windshield wiper fluid. Then if you come over to this cover, this is where the battery is on the vans. Now we will actually start talking about the powertrain. If you have a truck, you'll go to the truck bed, but because I have a van, I'll come to the back cargo area. And there's a panel here, has a couple bolts. You undo them, and then you get access to the engine. The engine is a E07A, I believe. It's a 3-cylinder, 660 cc's, 4 valves per cylinder. Mine is mated to a manual 5-speed transmission, and it has 4-wheel drive. These do come in automatic, but you don't really see them too often, and on top of that, they do come in 2-wheel drive as well. A very, very important thing I want to know is that the engines on these are interference. So if you snap the belt, odds are you're going to bend a valve, and that's a time-consuming job. So if you have no maintenance history, I would highly recommend doing the timing belt. Just as good preventative maintenance. I actually made a video on it. It's not the hardest job in the world, but it is a little time consuming. I'll make sure sure to link to that down below. The timing belts on these vans and trucks are actually known for wearing prematurely. So that's just, I don't think I can emphasize that enough. And also don't necessarily believe the mileage, or I guess the odometer, because those can easily be rolled back. Outside of the timing belts, the engines are actually known for being pretty good. The only other issue that really comes up a lot is that people complain about having idling issues, and it's carbureted, so that could be part of it. Maybe the carb needs to be adjusted. Or the other thing that happens is there's two solenoids on the carburetor, and they are known for going bad. Ironically enough, I actually have that. So when it comes to starting the van, occasionally it does have some minor issues with that. Side note, I do plan on making a video diagnosing that and showing people how to fix that in the future, so definitely stick around for that. Now that we know that the engines are pretty good, I do want to take a moment to talk about the transmission. There's three main things I want to talk about. The first one actually has to do with the shifter itself. There's a little bushing in there, and it's known to wear. I actually had issues shifting in my van. They have a shifter rebuild kit that's sold by, I believe, Willed Power Performance. I'll link to it down below. If you get a manual, anticipate that you will probably have to rebuild the shifter, but they have a kit and it's super cheap. After changing the kit, I went from having a couple inches of slack to virtually nothing. In addition to installing that kit, I also changed out the transmission fluid. Between doing those two things, that like made a night and day difference in the shifting of the transmission. Now, unfortunately, some people have reported having issues with the Synchros on these transmissions. My third gear is a little bit crunchy when I downshift. Other than that, I don't really have any issues with it, but other people have reported it, so it's just something to keep in mind. But if you change out the fluid and rebuild the shifter, that should fix the vast majority of shifting issues. When it comes to the mechanical stuff, that's pretty much it. These things are actually pretty good. It's really just regular maintenance for the most part. And I actually double checked on my van. I said 180,000 kilometers earlier. It actually has almost 181,000 kilometers. So this is a pretty high mileage K vehicle. Because I mentioned the mileage, one last little tip I want to give has to do with how you can verify it. A lot of the times you're not necessarily going to have all the paperwork. So what you can do is, this says 181,000 kilometers, right? So I'm going to come down here and look at the brake pedal and everything like that. And I'm also going to look at the wear in the seat. And the reason those things can be helpful is that if someone says they have a vehicle that has 10,000 kilometers, but the seat's torn, there's a lot of wear on the pedals, the shifter, and things like that, you know that there's probably something going on. So definitely take a close look at all those high traffic areas that you would expect wear. That's all the stuff I got for this video. I'll actually make sure to link some more resources down below that I think any potential Acty owner would find helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to answer. And also, if you own an Acty and have some good information that could help potential owners, please leave that in the comment section down below. I really hope this can be a very, very good resource to help future owners. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.